Morning. Man, I feel like I'm floating after an introduction like that. Thank you, Corey. That was incredible. So oftentimes when people hear the title giftology or they hear that we do these high-end gifts or you experience gifts, there's an automatic assumption that like, well, John, you must have grown up in the right neighborhood. Maybe you hung out with the right people. Maybe you grew up in New York or LA. That's where you learned these high-end gift strategies. And a lot of times people check out. I had the opportunity to speak to a big group of CFOs within the last couple months. And I remember the introduction, the guy came up and was like, game-changing gift strategy. And when I walked up, there was about 100 CFOs in the room, and every one of them, like in unison, crossed their arms, and the oxygen got sucked out of the room. It was like, and there was like poker face. Like, seriously, guy, you're gonna talk about game-changing gift strategy? Like, gratitude as a competitive advantage, that's your big idea? So I had my work cut out for me. So before I dive into my message and my big idea around giftology, I want to take you back a little bit to where I grew up. I had the opportunity to hear Dan's message, which I'm an Ohio boy. So I didn't grow up on either of the coasts. Any Midwest people in the house here? Awesome. Any Ohio outside of Dan? Yes, there's some Buckeyes. So I grew up in Ohio, Central Ohio, one of 6 kids, doing one of the more sexy things on the planet every day before I went to school. I get to go milk goats. It's pretty awesome, going to school with like crap on your boots. Like, I was that kid. I learned very early what I didn't want to do for the rest of my life. I was like, this blue collar stuff, like we had a 1-acre garden. We heated our house with wood. I was like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. Like, I need to get out. So I literally did not get 1 B all through school, all the way from pre-K to 12. I was like, I'm gonna go make a lot of money. And I didn't know what an entrepreneur was at the time, but I thought doctors, I think, make a lot of money and lawyers make a lot of money. And my grandfather had a business. He didn't like lawyers. So I'm like, I guess I'm gonna go be a doctor. So I went into school pre-med. I bought an S10 and one of those big 30-foot ladders. And I was the poor SOB if you've ever been in the Midwest and you're like, man, it's like negative 20 degrees out and there's somebody climbing a ladder. That was me. Now, fortunately, unfortunately, I fell off that ladder 2 times in 6 months. And I was like, this whole like blue collar thing just is not working. Like, I gotta find something else. So I started to look for other ideas, and I had a buddy of mine who was 6'8". He was a seminary student, and he was the antithesis of a salesperson, but he started selling these Cutco knives. And I'm like, Steve, you couldn't sell water to a person in the middle of the desert. Like, are you serious? Like, how are you selling these knives? I said, how much are they? And he said, some of the sets are like $2,000. I'm like, $2,000? Are you insane? He's like, I know, I'm suck at sales, but they keep buying them. I'm like, if Steve Wiggers can do it, I can try. So I literally went into the interview, wore my glasses to look smarter. I wore the one tie I had, no lie. I was pouring with sweat because I wasn't sure if I was gonna get hired. I was that nervous, I was that green. Fortunately, I got hired and I did 40 appointments my first 10 days, but my life changed. Not just because of this experience. Cutco is one of the best sales training programs on the planet, bar none. It's incredible. But I was dating a girl at the time. Her dad was an attorney. And he was the kind of attorney that would take like 2-hour lunches. He was always chill. And he seemed to be involved in everything in town, in the small country town. You know, the oil wells, the banks. And when you're poor, you notice when people are radically generous. And Paul was that radically generous person. And I was like, Paul, you're crazy. Like, he would find, for example, like deals on noodles. He'd buy a semi-load of noodles and everybody at church the next Sunday, all 200 people would end up with like a year's supply of noodles. I'm doing the math in my head. I'm like, Paul, that was 20 grand at least in noodles. Why would you do that? He got this smile on his face. He said, John, did you see their smiles? I'm like, even the most evil person on the planet would smile if they got 20 cases of noodles. Like, Paul, are you? He's like, I know, but that's just who I am. So I work up the courage after I'd already pitched my girlfriend's dad knives for himself, and he'd bought a set for his 3 unmarried daughters, and I'm pitching him again because I'm like, maybe he'll give away pocket knives. All of his clients are men, they're CEOs of these companies. Maybe at the holidays he'll give pocket knives. So before church, I work up the courage, I'm sweating again. I'm like, Paul, would you consider these pocket knives? And he said, I would, but what about the paring knives? Could I engrave those? And I'm sure I had this like deer in the headlights look like, you're gonna give grown men, CEOs of multi-million or $100 million companies, a kitchen tool? Are you crazy? I'm like, Paul, you know I'm desperate. I'm pitching you again for the second time in 2 weeks. Like, but why? He was 60 at the time, salt and pepper hair. He leans back in his chair. He said, John, in 35 years of business, the reason I have more deal flow, referrals, the reason everybody loves me in the community is I found that if you take care of the family, everything else in business takes care of itself. So for me, it was like I got hit with like a Louisville slugger upside the head because I was like, Paul, it really wasn't about the knife. It was about what it represented. Paul understood the mindset, the psychology, just intuitively, of using gratitude as a competitive advantage. So as a college kid, I'm 20 years old, and I started investing $200-300 in carving sets. Instead of going and buying beer, I was that kid that was in the dorm room, like wrapping gifts. It would be engraved, the CEO, spouse's name, family name, and I would send it off with a handwritten note that said, carve out 5 minutes for me, I promise it'll be worth your time. And I'd get the meeting 2 weeks later. Mrs. Smith calls me, I walk into this boardroom, it's all mahogany. I walk in with the one suit I have at 20, in walks 65-year-old CEO, Mr. Smith, $200 million insurance company, and his jaw hits the ground because he's expecting somebody in their 50s, some seasoned sales guy. And he's like, I'm really confused. Are you John? I'm like, yeah. He's like, are you here to sell me knives? I start nervously laughing. And I said, no, I'm here to help you and your 1,000 sales reps do exactly what I did to your top 10,000 relationships. And his jaw hits the ground again. He's like, holy crap, you're good. And I'd walk out of there an hour later with a PO for 1,000 knife sets. Not because I was the best salesperson in the world. In fact, I'm an introvert. I'm a farm boy. If you would have met me at 20 years old, you'd be like, there's no way that kid's speaking on stage. And yet, over the last 17 years, I've been applying these core questions. And the book is a 2-hour read, so I'm gonna condense down into the last 6 minutes. One story, and then I'm gonna dissect with a couple core questions I saw Paul ask himself anytime he was engaging with somebody. Whether it was the assistant, a prospect, a client, a supplier, it didn't matter. It was another human being. There's 10 questions, I'm gonna get through a few of them. But to kind of wrap up and dive into, so you can kind of see an example. About 10 years ago, I got the opportunity to meet a guy who owned 20 companies. And he said, John, we were having dinner, and he said, John, you should really join this group called EO. I'm like, I have no idea what EO is, but if you're a member of it, I'm in. Anybody familiar with EO, YPO in the crowd? Okay. So he's like, yeah, it's this awesome group. There's like 12,000 CEOs. You should be a great member. And I'm like, I'm in. He's like, actually, there's an event coming up in a couple months. It's in Vegas. The top 1,200 people will be there. I'm like, I'm in for that too. I literally pulled out my Amex. So we had dinner. A month later, I get this bill. And it was $10,000. I was like, holy crap, this EO thing is not a cheap date. So I go to the event and I walk in, Steve Wynn's speaking privately. And I'm like, I literally had in my mind, similar, maybe you've been to an event like that, where I almost left. I was like, I don't belong here. I barely have $1 million company. Like our gift strategy, our logistics company, like we were just getting going. I'm like, I don't belong here. There's guys that have $500,000 companies. Like, if you were at that event, one of the guys cut a check for $250,000 so KISS would play privately for us. I was like, $250,000? Like, I haven't made that in the last 2 years. Like, are you insane? So I almost left, and I remembered. I was like, John, you paid $10,000 for this. Suck it up. Go to the events. Go to the breakouts. So I go to one of the breakouts, and I look at the bio, and it was this guy that was talking about Junk, his junk company that he grew to over $100 million. Anybody heard Cameron Herold speak? He's one of the top business coaches in the world. I had no idea who he was. So I weasel my way in, it's standing room only, and everything that came out of Cameron's mouth was like gold. It's like, I had this epiphany. I was like, if I can't hire him, I know I can't afford his $10,000 a month coaching fee, but I need him as a mentor and advocate. Like, and I'm sure you've had those times where you're like, I just need this client, I just need this mentor. I'm like, I need to get inside this guy's head and blow him away with some act of gratitude. So in my head, I'm waiting in line. And I find out he's coming to Cleveland 3 months later to speak to our EO chapter. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have Cavs seats, lower level. It's opening night, the night before he speaks. LeBron's in town. We're gonna go to a steak dinner and a basketball game. Like, we're gonna be high-fiving. We're gonna be buds. That's what I had in my head. So I come up to Cameron. I'm like, hey, Cameron, I hear you're coming to town. What do you think about this? We go to a dinner and a ball game. And I'm expecting him to be like, hell yeah. And in typical Cameron fashion, he's like, I don't have anything else going on. I guess I'll go. And like somebody punched me in the gut. I was like, oh, duh, John. Like everybody on the planet follows the same entertaining program. Ball game, golf, trade shows. Like it's the same playbook. Like this isn't going to work to wow this guy. So I'm like, I wonder what else he's going to do. I said, Cameron, are you going to do anything else when you're in town? He said, actually, the dollar's really weak. I'm going to go shopping. I'm like, this is my angle. What were you going to shop at? And he said, I love Brooks Brothers. So on the spot, I'm like, I'm a Jose Bank guy. What's your shirt size? I want to send you a shirt. And he looks at me a little bewildered, like, does this dude have a man crush on me? He didn't say it. He actually told me a size. He was polite, the Canadian politeness. He told me, I'm like, great, we'll go to dinner, ball game, I'm gonna send you this shirt. So I call my business partner, I'm like, we have to do this thing. Like I have this idea, he could be a game changer for our business. There's a pause on the other line. He's like, and I just sold 50% of the company to this guy. John, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Are you insane? We can't afford that, no way, absolutely not. I'm like, Rod, you're right, it is dumb. So I hang up. 3 months go by, the morning Cameron's gonna be flying in. He starts texting me, John, my flight's delayed, I'm not sure if I'll make it in time. And I'm like, son of a gun. He's trying to bail on this dinner and a ball game. And I'm like, Cameron, even if you get in late, we'll just go to dinner. Who cares about the game? He's like, fine, great. So I call Rod back, I'm like, we have to do this. And he's like, John, I think it's the dumbest idea ever, but if you believe in it enough, it's gonna come out of your draw if it doesn't work. I'm like, okay. Hang up, drive to Brooks Brothers. Put the Amex down, put the sizes down. I said, I want one of everything in your new fall collection. All of your shirts, jackets, pants, sweaters, belts, you name it. Junior sales associate's like, you're joking, right? And with a deadpan face, sweat pouring down, I'm like, I wish I was. I want it all. So it takes them an hour to gather everything up. They start ringing it, gets to the end, and they go to swipe the Amex, and I'm like, please go through, like, because it was $7,000 in clothes. Then we go to the Ritz. I said, you have one of the top business coaches in the entire world coming to town. Do you want to do something amazing? It's the Ritz. What do they say? Yes, sure, what are you thinking? I'm like, I want to merchandise the hotel room to look like a Brooks Brothers store. Sweaters there, jackets there, this is. Like, no problem, Mr. Ruhlin. We merchandise it. I'm waiting down in the lobby, drinking. I got triple on the rocks. And my business partner's in my ear. He's like, he's gonna think you're a stalker. This is the dumbest idea. This is gonna backfire. I'm sweating. Cameron comes in, one of those travel days from hell, like, why did I ever agree to this stupid dinner and a ball game? He wants to go to bed. I'm like, Cameron, go take a shower. Come down whenever you're ready. And he comes back down 25 minutes later, and he's glowing. He said, John, whatever you want to talk about, for as long as you want to talk about it, I'm all ears. I've never had anybody treat me this way. He said, I've gone to Dubai and crazy places. I fly first class like this. The way you made me feel was incredible. Now you fast forward over the last 10 years, I've been invited not only to his wedding and to his 50th birthday party. He's done more for me than $10 million in advertising could do. President of Starbucks, doesn't matter the client, he opens the door. And oftentimes, like when I spoke at Google, people are like, John, like that's great, but $7,000, even for Google, they're like, that's a little pricey. I'm like, you don't understand the point. I'm like, here's the kicker. Cameron came back to me and said, John, the way you made me feel with this act of gratitude was the gift, the personalization, all of these things, all the details that you put into it. I can't let you buy the clothes as well. I couldn't take all of those clothes back in my luggage anyway. I picked out the clothes I wanted. The other ones, obviously, you'd arrange to go back. Either you're gonna tell me how much they cost, I'm gonna write a check for that, or I'm gonna guess and I'm gonna round up by 50% and I'm gonna send you a check for that. It's like the personalization. So that entire experience cost me nothing. Now, why did the experience work? First off, it was personalized. Oftentimes, people are like, you know what, does it really matter? I'm gonna throw my logo on it. I'm gonna send somebody a gift card. Like, the personalization mattered. Paul always personalized the gift. The other part of the story is after I did that gift, every quarter for the next 5 years, I sent him another gift. And all of those gifts were targeted at point number 2, which is the inner circle. They're all targeted towards a spouse, his assistant, his wife. That inner circle is where you get somebody. I spent, this year, it'll be $350,000 on gifts. 80% of them are targeted at the person's inner circle. I get nice things all the time. You get nice things all the time. The decision makers you're gonna show gratitude to get treated like gold all the time. Guess who gets the worst side of being in business? Their inner circle. So the reason we sent you a knife and we personalized it if we could to your family is you are leaving them and coming here. They get the worst side of being in business. So when we acknowledge the person's inner circle with gratitude at a super high level, all of a sudden we've had people literally like pushing their spouses out of the house saying, you can go to that conference anytime you want. As long as I'm getting gifts like this, I'm all in. Because they've never been acknowledged that way. The third thing is timing. Dan talked about this. Imagine if the gift had been given on site versus, like I had handed him the gift versus, surprising him, having it all merchandise. Imagine if you'd gotten the gift as part of like a grab bag. Like the timing of the gift matters. We all want to be surprised and delight. The surprise and delight element is what works and makes somebody feel, even a billionaire, when we give them the right gift in the right way, they oftentimes cry. They're like, nobody's ever thought about the timing and the little details. The fourth thing, What's the most I can do? Oftentimes, we ask ourselves, what's the least we can get away with? In the Cameron example, why didn't you just do a gift card, John? Why didn't you just pick out 3 shirts? Well, I said, what's the most I can do? I can buy the whole frickin' store. And when you do that for people, it doesn't have to be $7,000, but when you go all in to show gratitude to somebody and you say, I could get away with this, but I'm gonna go here. All of a sudden, the other person says, wow, I've never had anybody be that vulnerable and go that all in on me, even when I'm already a client. People feel that. I don't care who they employ, the client, whatever else. I know there's a guy here that I think, is it Hunter Hunt, that gave $100,000 to all of his employees if they hit a goal. I'm sure he could have gotten away with 50 grand. But he said, what's the most I can do? I'm gonna go with 100 grand. What's the most I can do? Paul did that in every scenario. Buy a whole semi-load, didn't matter. The 5th one, what would they really want? Did Cameron really want another dinner and a round of golf or ball game tickets? No. He wanted to go to sleep. He also wanted to go shopping at Brooks Brothers. I made the Brooks Brothers happen. Your clients and employees are the same way. They don't want necessarily another steak dinner out or another trip away. Oftentimes they want more time with their family. What would they really want? And so for our employees, one of the things that we do, and I'm gonna wrap up with this, is we said, what would our employees, all of our employees are spread out across the country, they're working moms. And we said, they would never do this for themselves, even if we gave them the cash. We started to pay to have their houses cleaned every other week. Automatically, they don't even have a choice. They either take it or leave it, they don't get the cash. When I spoke at Google, I had a couple employees pull me aside and say, John, are you hiring? I swear. They do everything for us at Google. They don't do anything for us at our home. They don't make our quality of life better at home. They want us to work 24/7 at the place, which is fine, smart. But we said, what would the employee really want? And oftentimes, taking care of their family, they would never spend it on themselves. But when you can start to put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, what would they really want? And do that, not make it about you, your logo, your brand, how cool you are. You make it all about them. Your relationships flourish. I wanted to dive in a little bit more, but combining 2 hours down to 10 minutes is very difficult. If you guys want the other 10, I'm happy to email you the entire book, PDF. I'll end with the free gift. Email John at Ruhlin Group and we'll send you the free PDF of the book so you can get all 10 questions and everything dialed in. You don't have to buy the book. Thank you so much for Julie and for Alexander for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.